The KindlED podcast is brought to you by Prenda. Prenda can help you start and run an amazing microschool. For more information, go to prenda.com.
Gentle parenting is under the authoritative umbrella when you talk about different parenting approaches, where we see the child as a member in the family, not somebody to control, not somebody that needs to follow orders and listen just because I'm an adult. This is a young person who has skills to learn, and they're going to behave differently because they're so new in this world. They've only been on this planet for a few years, and they don't know how to behave when they're feeling angry. So it's my job to help them experience their emotion and learn how to behave differently.
Hi, and welcome to the KindlED podcast, where we dig into the art and science behind kindling the motivation, curiosity, and mental well-being of the young humans in our lives.
Together, we'll discover practical tools and strategies you can use to help kids unlock their full potential and become the strongest version of their future selves.
Welcome to the KindlED podcast. Adriane, I have a really cool story to tell you.
I can't wait.
Okay, so I think we've talked a little bit about my 6-year-old and how she's like having kind of like a negative lens on life a little bit and like kind of feeling a little victimized. There are some girls in her microschool who she thinks are not being nice to her, just normal 6-year-old kind of back and forth things. But I think it's really important to stop and not just brush these little opportunities to learn under the rug as like normal kid stuff. So we were having this conversation last night at bedtime. I was trying to help her see that regardless of what's happening in real life, there was a story element to like her. I was trying to help her recognize her narrative and that was causing her feelings, right? And so we had this conversation and I helped her see that. And I helped her see that maybe the girls at school also have stories and, it's just kind of this back and forth.
How did you help her see it? Like, did you just tell her? Or because I feel like with a 6-year-old, it's harder just to say, hey, you have a story that you're telling yourself. So how did you do this? I'm super curious.
So my 4-year-old was also in the room and she was saying, hey, the 6-year-old it's essentially like being about being left out. We'll just focus on that. I did a full collaborative problem solving, like what's going on conversation. We made a list of like 10 things that were causing conflict in their lives. And they were like rattling them off. And I was like, every time I'd put a finger up, yep, that one, got it, yep. And so they felt really heard. And they chose one to focus on, which was not feeling included, because my 4-year-old is saying, the 6-year-old, you guys don't include me. And then that's the same story at school. These girls aren't including her. So it's like, look, you're being treated this way. It's making you feel terrible. And what you're doing with that is turning around and giving that to someone else. So don't you think that maybe these girls are feeling left out in a different situation that we can't see, and they're turning it around and leaving you out? We're just all passing it around instead of saying, hey, let's not treat each other like this. These aren't the results that we want,
So what was the result of this?
Oh my gosh, like just melted my heart. She kind of just like gave me a hug afterwards and she just said, Mom, can we have this conversation every night? And I said, like, talk about your feelings every night. And she was like, yeah, I just need to talk about my feelings every night.
Oh my gosh. Mark Brackett at Permission to Feel would be so proud.
Yes, I know. So I'm like, oh, that was just a good mom moment for me to realize like, I need to open up more time and be more intentional about like talking about these things. So
only if my boys would want to talk about their feelings. It's the opposite. I'm like, can we talk about these things every night? No, Mom.
So funny.
But this is a perfect segue into who we're talking to today, because KJ Althoff, she is with Big Life Journal, but she also has her own platform and she is on Instagram. She's the Gentle Parent and she talks a lot about generational patterns. So I was treated this way from my parent, and then now I'm unintentionally treating my child in this way. And it happens in kids too. So I think we talk about this all the time, but being self-aware is huge. Okay, let's recognize this. Now, what can we do about it? So can you tell us a little bit more about KJ?
Yes, I can. KJ is the director of content for Big Life Journal. She's also built her own company on social media with over 100,000 followers on Instagram, sharing about her personal gentle parenting journey as well as healing from childhood wounds. She has a master's degree in mental health counseling and is also a certified parenting coach. KJ and her husband Adam have been married for 7 years. They had a 6-year-old son who is the reason KJ began her gentle and conscious parenting journey more than 3 years ago.
Let's jump into our conversation with KJ. Welcome to the KindlED podcast, KJ. We are so excited to have you here today.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Okay, so let's just jump right in. Can you tell us a little bit about who you are and how you came to the work you're currently doing at Gentle Healing Mom and Big Life Journal? And what is your big why? How did you fall into this work?
Yes. So I became a gentle parent a little over 4 years ago and started sharing my journey about what gentle parenting is and how I've been parenting my son differently, because I very much was a traditional parent, very much control-based, fear tactics used, and I just didn't feel right as a parent. But I was just parenting the way I was parented, so I thought that's what I was supposed to do. And I discovered gentle parenting. It wasn't called gentle parenting at the time, but I just took it upon myself to do my own research. And I just realized, wow, there is another way to parent children without shaming them, without judging them, without scaring them into doing what we want them to do, because it never felt good for me. So I started sharing my journey. And then Alexandra is the founder of Big Life Journal, connected with me on social. And that's how I joined the Big Life Journal team. I've been with the company for over a year now, and it's been life-changing because our mission at Big Life Journal matches so much with my mission, my personal mission as a parent, in sharing just how parents can break cycles and raise children in a home filled with love and support and still help them gain those skills that many of us didn't have as children. So that's kind of where I am in my life right now, is helping parents learn how to reparent themselves.
That's huge. Yeah, I had a similar moment. I wasn't as traditional. I was very positive discipline though. So there was still this level of punishments and rewards and, but there was still that positive piece instead of just so much control. And then I read Dr. Dan Siegel and Tina Payne Bryson's books, and I was just like, oh my gosh, why am I treating my kids this way? And then with Big Life Journal and you, KJ, I have been following you on Pinterest. I love watching all of the videos that you guys put out and just all the resources you have for parents. So for listeners, if you don't follow Big Life Journal, definitely on Pinterest and Instagram. There are so many incredible resources, and we'll get more into all of that as well.
All right. So we want to talk a little bit here at the beginning about emotional regulation. And this might be a word that's new to a lot of our listeners. So can you define what you mean when you talk about emotional regulation? And why is that important for kids? Why is it important for adults?
So many of us who were not taught emotional intelligence are very reactive, right? Like as parents, our children throw tantrums and we just react. We don't even realize what's going on with our body. And we just believe that we can go from 0 to 10 in a split second, but we don't realize things are actually happening to our body well before we get to our breaking point. And emotional regulation is being able to be aware that our emotions are changing, our nervous systems are changing. And when we become dysregulated, we are less likely to talk in a respectful way or behave in a respectful way. We often lose control of our own behaviors. And so if we can become more aware of what's going on with our body, we can catch ourselves sooner and we can do things to help our nervous systems regulate again. And this is so important for parents to learn to do, because we can't teach children to do this if we can't do this ourselves. We can't tell children to calm down if we are yelling at them because we've lost control, right? It's very much contradicting to what our children are trying to learn. So if we want our children to grow up with patience and to manage their behaviors when they're emotional, we need to be modeling that to our children. So it's important for us to recognize what emotional state we're in so that we can use the tools and strategies to keep our bodies regulated.
A big turning point for me in all of this was realizing that I was asking my kids to do things that I was unable to do. So exactly the point you're making here. I'm telling them it's not okay for you to be upset. You need to get over this. You need to calm down. Just stop crying, all of these things. And then I'm escalating and yelling at them and crying in the pantry, eating chocolate chips and doing all sorts of things that I'm telling them that they need to be better than that. Better than meaning obviously these things mean weakness and these things are not preferable, right? And unintentionally teaching them that like the feeling part of you is bad and it's not okay. And it's like, if you are going to do feelings, you need to go away from me to do feelings. And what I realized is that, wow, I was not parented in a way. My parents are wonderful people. They did not, this was not part of my upbringing, being okay with feelings. If you ask my siblings, I'm the youngest of 6, and they tell you that all of their memories of like little Katie are just me crying under my bed because I would get my feelings hurt or something wouldn't go my way. And I didn't have any way to say, hey, I didn't have anyone helping me advocate for myself or understand what I was feeling or what was going on. So I would just like, and the message was, if you're having feelings, you need to excuse yourself and go have them somewhere else because they're inconveniencing everyone. So I would go cry under my bed, and then I'd come out when my feelings were over, when they were past. And so I never learned how to handle them. And when my kids were doing these same things, what I was really saying to them when I was saying it's not okay for you to cry, what I'm really saying is your crying makes me uncomfortable because I'm not okay. Like I don't have the emotional capacity or skills to handle sad feelings because I wasn't ever allowed to feel them myself. And once I realized that, I was like, oh, maybe crying is actually fine. Like maybe these things are actually good.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
And giving yourself self-compassion. And when we look at it from a lens of nervous system and what we know now, and that's the thing, we didn't know all of these things, and it wasn't inundated. We didn't have social media and just constant messages telling us about how to regulate your body. But when we look at it from a nervous system lens, and we understand that such kids have a very underdeveloped nervous system, and they need that co-regulation. So it's not even that what we're modeling to them or what we're telling them, but it's even more innate than that. And it's just like that we're constantly giving these signals, and nonverbal is way more, they get a lot more communication from nonverbal than they do verbal. So when we look at it from that point of view, I'm like, okay, what can I do to make sure that I can regulate myself first? Because if not, we're just going to be a hot mess all the time.
We're supposed to be we're beings that need connection. And when we are taught that emotions are bad because our parents, I mean, many of us were raised with wonderful people. So it's not that any parent is, if we have cycles to break, it's because our parents were terrible. No, not the case. I had wonderful parents as well, but they were parenting us in the way that they knew, and that's how they were parented. I mean, that's what generational parenting is like. And until somebody learns to do it better, the cycle will continue. And if we, like you said, like if we raise children to learn to cry under their beds to deal with their emotions, that is not setting them up to be a natural person that can connect with another human being, which is what we need at our core. And so many of us have a hard time connecting emotionally because we weren't taught how to do that. And then we wonder why we have this dysfunction in relationships. And we wonder why we can't connect with our partners or connect with our children or connect with our friends. And it's because we never built those skills as kids. And so I think this generation of parents today who are making it a priority to break cycles have it the hardest because they are parenting their children at the same time they are learning how to regulate themselves. And it's hard to do that when you don't even have years of practice, which is what we're giving children today. Is we're allowing them to practice all of these skills that take years as their nervous systems develop, as their brains develop, as they build those skills. They're receiving that from parents today, but we have it the hardest trying to do that for them.
And we keep talking about parents, but this applies for teachers too. Think about if you're a teacher, especially in a traditional school, how many hours are you with your kids? A lot. And so this applies for anyone that has a close relationship with a child. And we know from the science and from the research and attachment research, it really just takes one connection and one person. So even if a child isn't able to get it from home, they can still get it from an educator, a coach, a pastor, someone else that they're in close relationship with. And so can you share some practical tips or exercises for developing emotional regulation skills? Like how are you doing this work personally?
Yes. So awareness is huge. If you're just starting and you don't know where to start by just becoming aware. And when you find yourself triggered in a situation by your child's behavior, or a child in your classroom's behavior is triggering for you, pause. That pause is so important because it prevents you from just reacting, and it gives you a moment to recognize what's going on in my body right now. Am I feeling it in my chest? Is my chest tight? Is my heart racing? Are my paws getting sweaty, or are they clenched? Is my face getting red? Is heat rising? You want to recognize, like, what does it look like when your body is in fight or flight mode? What is happening? Because the sooner you can recognize it, the quicker you can do something about it. And you become better at catching yourself earlier. Like I said earlier, we don't go from 1 to 10 out of nowhere. Your body will start to show you signs well before that, but we just have to get used to recognizing them early. And then we have to have strategies in mind. So there's different things we can do to regulate our nervous system. For some people, they might need to shake it out of their body, right? Like shake their bodies and physically move their bodies in order to kind of shake that energy out. Or cold water is really helpful for calming your vagus nerve and calming your nervous system. So you could drink a cold glass of water slowly. You could splash some water on your face. You can put an ice cube in your mouth, something like that, to just, if you're very sensory, like that's something that can really help you tell your body, like, I'm okay.
I do a lot of the and a lot of the
yes. My that
kids
actually helps
are so used to it now, but it really does help. And I want to back up just slightly, is when you said, oh, just pause. If this is brand new to you, just pausing, honestly, can feel very difficult, because if your brain is so used to being flooded with cortisol and all, adrenaline and all these stress hormones, when that happens, that pause can be really difficult. But the more it's a practice. The more you practice, the easier it will become. Or what I had done when I started learning about this work is I'm in the car a lot. So every time I would grab the steering wheel, I would take nice deep breaths. And I would do like my 5, 6, 8, or whatever the numbers are. I don't count because I have OCD and I try something OCD crazy. But every time I grabbed the steering wheel. And so what ended up happening is, every time now that I get in a car, I just start deep breathing. I don't even think about it anymore. I've trained my brain to just activate that parasympathetic, which is really huge. So what are some other tools? Sorry, I didn't mean to interject, but I just want to say, we say like just a pause, but sometimes that could be really, really hard, especially if you're already in fight or flight. It's extremely difficult. Or what I'll do is, if I'm already past that, I know I should be pausing, but I don't want to pause. Like I can feel it in my body.
Yes, absolutely. Yes. The pause is very, very hard. And the next hardest thing is knowing what to do after you pause, right? Like, your pause, now what? So if you don't have a plan in place, you're kind of set up to not succeed in that moment. So thinking and having a plan is so helpful. What I do too, when I'm in that moment where I'm like past the pause, is I will step away. Like sometimes it's stepping out of into another room, like just removing yourself from that anxious environment, or even stepping outside. This is what I do that helps me so well, is going outside, doing that slow, deep breathing with a fresh air, and closing my eyes and just using my other senses, and just kind of recognizing, grounding myself, reminding myself that I am safe. I will get through this. Having mantras are so important. And what you're doing is you're teaching your body, like, this is an emotion and it will pass. No one experiences an emotion forever. And that's a lesson I wish we all learned as children, but we're teaching our children now. But we just have to take a moment and just let the emotion pass. Feel it. Know you're safe. Your children are safe. And you can go back when you're ready. So you're not in that reactive mode. You're back into responding.
And we can do this with our kids too.
Yes.
Just the other day, my son started to lose it. He was already at 10. And so I had to go pick up groceries. So I just picked him up and I was like, I know you don't want me to put you in the car right now. And within a few minutes, he calmed down. If we would have stayed in the house, I bet his, you can call it tantrum, meltdown. My kids are neurodivergent, so it's more of a meltdown, would have lasted way longer. But I just got him out of that environment. And then he was like making funny faces. And by the time we pulled into the grocery store, he was calmed down. So it works for kids too, not just for us adults.
Hey, real quick, can we pause? I know we've talked about this on previous episodes, but you mentioned the vagus nerve, and something that helped me, like, people talk about deep breathing a lot, like so much that it's like, okay, I get it. You want me to breathe. Like, I'm not open to that message sometimes, because it's like, I'm not in that world. Like, I don't want to, like, some people, like, I don't know. It just seems like it's not going to help. But when I learned about the vagus nerve and how that's kind of like one of the main nerves in your body that either kind of polices your safety, the safety cues that your body's receiving, whether or not you're going to go into fight or flight. And it's connected to all of your organs. And you can't really control your stomach or your spleen, right? Like, you can't make a decision and have that part of your body do anything differently, send your vagus nerve a different signal, but you can control your lungs and you can control your voice. And so it innervates your lungs and it innervates your voice. And so, like Adriane's talking about with like doing those trilly things, I can't even do it.
Try, Katie, try.
Maybe when we're off camera, I will try. So like, you're telling your vocal folds, you're communicating with your nervous system that like, actually we're safe. And when we take deep breaths, your lungs are you're sending a kind of a reverse message to your vagus nerve that like, actually, if there was actual danger here, if there was a lion, if there was something that we really needed to react to, we would be having very fast, quick breathing. And if I can intentionally slow my breathing down, that communicates to my nervous system that there isn't actually anything to be afraid of in my environment, which then backs me out of the fight or flight mode. The parasympathetic nervous system comes online and is able to help you get regulated again. And when I understood the science behind that, I was like, okay, I will breathe.
Yeah, it's not just for like the woo, you know?
No, exactly. So that what you explained it is exactly right. Like, we're able to communicate because if we were legitimately in a in a survival mode, if we were in danger, we wouldn't be sitting and breathing deeply, right? Like, we wouldn't be humming or singing or doing things. It's kind of helping to snap our body out of it because it happens so without even our knowledge. Like, it just happens when we're triggered. All of a sudden our body just believes that there's a threat and we have to do something about it. And we have to learn like, no, we're safe. We grew up believing that this situation, my child's behavior, is a threat because maybe we got punished or, yelled at or screamed at or spanked as children when we behave that way. So our bodies learned, oh, that's not a safe behavior. And when we see our children displaying it, our bodies unconsciously get into that same fight or flight feeling because we think, oh, something's going to happen. That's not safe, or something's going to happen to me. Something's going to happen to my child. And when we use our tools to try and calm our nervous systems, we are also rewiring our brains to learn like, no, this is actually safe. Like, your body is safe where it is and everything will be just fine. And that alone is very challenging to do as a parent or a teacher.
Can we flip this into like the child's perspective real quick? We've been talking a lot about our emotional regulation. Can we just talk about like the child's nervous system and the child's fight or flight? Like, what do you see when you talk to parents?
Yeah. So when parents tell me that they struggle to remain calm when their children are having tantrums, or when their children are doing things that are, getting too messy, or, that always comes back to when they were kids, when they did that and how their parents responded to them. And what I try and help parents see is what the child is going through. Like, that is their way of processing that emotion. They are releasing that emotion, that big feeling in their body, that in the way they know how, in the limited skills that they have, where they are developmentally. That is what they naturally know to do when they are in fight or flight. And so parents often believe that behavior is manipulative and children are doing certain things to manipulate a situation. And I challenge them to think, the word manipulate has such a negative connotation because we think when an adult is manipulative, they are, doing things intentionally to, manipulate you and get you to do something that you wouldn't normally do. A child, yes, if you view it as manipulation, but they're doing it from a different place. They have a different intention. Their intention is to meet their need. They don't know how to communicate with words, what exactly their body needs in that moment. So they go into fight or flight mode and they scream, they try to get your attention, and they're basically telling you, I need you. I need something from you. I don't know what it is, but my body doesn't feel right. And you're my safe person. And I need you to help me through this. And if parents now learn, okay, so my child needs this, I'm triggered, but I'm going to take care of myself so that I can be that safe person for my child. Are they hungry? Are they tired? Do they need attention? Do they need connection from me? What is it that they need? And we need to figure out what that is for them, because our job is to meet their needs. And until we meet their needs, they're going to either continue with that behavior or they're going to shut down. So those are moments for parents and teachers to really strengthen their connection and relationship with that child, because that child's going to learn, is this a person that can meet my needs, or do I need to protect myself from them?
And this gets back into how you're parented too, because I think a lot of us were labeled and shamed for those behaviors that were really just our nervous system kind of helping us, trying to communicate our needs. But then we were labeled as mean or aggressive or lazy or something like that. So then when we see those behaviors in our kids, those labels come to mind, and we think this is a character issue. And no way am I, as a parent, going to be the parent of someone who is lazy or someone who is, these kind of things that are counter to our core values. It makes it difficult for us to unconditionally accept our children if we see these kind of like what sometimes are seen as character flaws, when really all of this stuff is just chemical and nervous system and needs. So if we can also try to halt those labels, then we will become less triggered and our nervous systems will stay calmer. If we can see that it's just like, oh, they're tired, or yeah, they're really frustrated, and that's understandable, instead of some big scary label.
That's such a good point, because and to add to that, it's that expectation too that parents and teachers might place on children, like, well, this child isn't like that. Like, you should also be more like this child, or, siblings, like, your brother's not like that. Why are you like that? And we start comparing children, which is also dangerous, because every child should be seen as their own person. And you could have two 7-year-olds, and one could be, very much more developed as far as being able to regulate themselves than this other 7-year-old. But there's nothing wrong with that 7-year-old who's still learning. And it also depends on when they start learning. So if you work with a toddler on, meeting their needs and helping them practice identifying their emotions and breathing, they're going to be further along from, when they get into 5th grade, and a 5th grader's never been introduced to that. So every child is so different. So we need to also look at that specific child and what they need.
Exactly. So there are ways that we measure kids, right? There is height, there is weight, there's test scores, right? There's not like a polyvagal nervous system development measure, right? You can't see that. You can't see their prefrontal cortex development. I mean, you can't like put them against the wall, and you can't get a metric on it, is what I'm saying. So that's why we think like, oh, you're both 7. You should both be acting this way. But really, there's so much development happening and not happening. The body is getting bigger, but that does not mean the brain is developing or that the skills are being developed.
And we should ourselves too. I should be able to stay calm right now. Well, and I would love to talk a little bit more about reparenting, KJ.
Mm-hmm.
So what is that concept, and how does this help with what we're talking about?
Yes. Okay. So what I like to tell parents is, many of them feel guilty, right? Like, they're just discovering this new way of parenting, and they feel so guilty that they haven't been parenting this way for years. Their kids might be tweens and teens, or they might be 4, that guilt is there because we all want to do better. We all want to be better. And we all worry that our children are going to grow up damaged, or, or they're not going to, that we're going to be traumatizing them because we've had our own experiences, and we don't want to do that for our children. And what I like to say to those parents is that the fact that you are listening to this podcast, or following this account, or reading the books tells me that you innately are a good parent. You are a wonderful parent, because you could know this exists and choose not to learn more about it or better yourself. And we don't become different parents overnight. It takes so much time. It takes a lot of time to unlearn decades of beliefs that we have about ourselves and how we handle our stress and our big emotions. So we have to slowly kind of work on that, and then also to build the skills. And so awareness, we talked about, is really important, because you also want to be aware of what is your natural tendency in those moments when you are triggered, or when your child does something and you normally lash out or lose control. Like, what behaviors do you do? And then what could you do differently next time? Have a plan, have some ideas of what you could do differently. For me, it was, I stopped using timeouts. That was my go-to form of discipline when my child was a toddler. And it was terrible. He was crying, I was crying. It was just an awful feeling in our household. And that was really when I started to do some research. I'm like, what other forms of discipline are there? Like, I didn't even know what there was. I never spanked, but I can understand, the urge to spank your children, especially if you were spanked as a child. And so I started learning about time ins. And I'm like, oh, okay, so this exists. And I understand why it's important, instead of leaving your child alone with their emotions for a time out, you sit with them and you help them see that their emotion is safe and that I'm not going to love them less because they're feeling that way, right? We're getting rid of that feeling of you need to go deal with that on your own. You're not welcome in this family until you've dealt with that. It's more of I'm here for you and your big feelings.
I love this example of timeout because essentially what you're telling the child when they're having a big feeling and you separate them, what you're saying is, I as a parent am not capable, like your feeling is too big for me and I'm not strong enough and I'm not, like you cannot rely on me in these moments. I'm too, like I can't handle it. And sometimes we'll even say that, like, I just can't handle you, or like you are too much right now. And we as adults, like we are the wall between that child and the big scary world, right? And so if you're telling them that like, wow, this crying, like I can't even deal with the noise or the mess you're making, like that doesn't lead them to trust you to care for their needs. And they are getting a lot of their safety cues from you when you are providing for their needs. And so while it's totally annoying and like is triggering, like all of that's very real. And we've talked about many strategies here for helping with that. It was also very like, I don't know, just something that really changed my lens on all of this to realize like, oh, I need to be, even if I am struggling, I need to get myself together and like be the grown up a little bit. And that's like kind of almost like harsh words, but it's like, they really do need us to be their grown-ups, and we need to do the work of reparenting ourselves and growing ourselves up, because while our bodies have gotten bigger, none of this is really like fully wired in many of us, right? So we really need to prioritize making sure that we can handle a toddler tantrum.
In my childhood, it wasn't that necessarily I wasn't allowed to have emotions, or that I'm sure I was given timeouts and things, but I was raised by my dad. And then every time my mom would come pick me up, I was her therapist. I was her strong person. I was the one, she would just come to me, even when I was like 6, 7, 8, 9. So that is something that I've had to reparent of. You don't have to solve everyone's problems. You don't have to rescue everyone. So there's different parts. I think the biggest thing, like you said, is awareness, being aware. Why am I behaving this way? Why do I feel this way? What is this connected to? And then use these strategies and tools to be able to create new neural pathways in our brains. That's the one thing about brain science that I love, is that our brains are plastic. This isn't just, oh, this is just how things are. No, like there's brain injury and things like that could prevent new neural pathways to be developed. But our brains are incredible, and especially when littles, like their brains are the most plastic and the most durable. So it's such a great time for us to be able to pass these, tools that we now know about to them.
So KJ, what are some of the challenges? Like when you're working with parents on all this and you present these ideas, like what is the pushback? What are the kind of mountains you have to help people climb here?
It's really overcoming our own limiting beliefs and our own upbringings and what we believe is true. So if we believe that our children are a reflection of us, we're going to have a hard time releasing those expectations of them behaving a certain way, because we worry that that's going to be seen as us being bad parents or not being able to control our kids. And if we can release the people-pleasing tendencies that we have. And I was also emotionally parentified as a child, which my mom also relied on me to emotionally support her, which meant that I didn't have anyone to emotionally support me. And that's exactly why it's so important for us to develop that kind of a relationship with our children now, because we want them to grow up into teenagers that come to us when they are experiencing a big feeling. We don't want them to go lock themselves up in their rooms because that's all they've known whenever they had a big feeling.
Or go to a friend or go to a peer. Like what we know about attachment is that we want them to be close to us as their parent.
Exactly. We want them to know, yes, my mom, my dad can handle my big feelings because they handled it just fine when I was 3 years old. And this is a new big emotion that I'm feeling. And I don't know who to turn to. Oh, my parents, because my parents have been that safe, supportive relationship my whole life. And that's exactly what we want to develop as far as when we raise our children.
I want to go back to something you just said about like if we can control our kids, then we're good parents. Teachers feel this constantly because they're like, essentially I've heard the phrase before, like a quiet classroom is a good classroom. And like, if you can keep your class quiet and control all those kids, that's what makes you a good teacher. Like essentially when people say, yeah, she's a really good teacher, like that's kind of what they mean, is that like they can control this class. We have this concept of classroom management and books and articles about how to manage all of the children and their behaviors. And I just think that that's part of the challenge in rethinking this, is because if I stop using all of these harmful methods to control kids, they will get noisier, they will get messier, and that will be a bad reflection on me. So we need to change that societal belief together that there's judgment in the air, around that.
Yeah, I walk into a micro school and it is so loud. Typically, if I walk into a quiet micro school, I'm like, what is happening? But my lens has changed of what a good school environment is. I mean, kids are creating, and we have a funny like inside Brenda joke about kids running around with scissors. But one time I literally have like walked into a micro school and this kid had 5 scissors and he's like cutting like outside, like he was cutting a bush or something. And I just was laughing so hard. He was safe. I promise. All of you that are concerned about his safety, he was safe. They were kid proof scissors. But yeah, I feel like that's just a cultural thing too, and not just American culture. There's lots of cultures that this is reflected upon, of like being quiet, being still. Like I have a friend who, her husband was from Japan, and every time they would go visit, she said, "My kids like." Their nervous systems are just freaking out because they are not allowed to talk at all. And so it's cultural. It's not like we're trying to be bad and we're trying to do things that aren't good for kids. We just have to relearn as a society, not just as individuals.
It's also not that kids don't need to learn how to sit still and how to listen and follow instructions. Like those are all skills kids need. We've just swung the pendulum a little too far, right? Like there's a healthy medium.
I think the hardest thing for both parents and teachers is that mindset shift. So you had mentioned, Katie, about the classroom expectations, that you're a good teacher if your children are quiet and in their seats and they listen to you. And that is the wrong kind of what measurement of a successful teacher, and even as a successful parent. So a mindset shift would be, instead of I'm a good parent, I'm a good teacher if my child is behaved, it's more of I'm a good parent when my child has felt seen, heard, loved, understood. That should be the metric that we base our day off of. So did my children, the difficult child in my classroom, after his difficult moment, did he afterwards feel seen, heard, loved, understood? Did we connect? If the answer is yes, then you are an amazing teacher.
So what misconceptions have you found that people have about gentle parenting? Even that, I personally don't even use that phrase because I don't know why. I was trying to dig into why I don't like to say gentle parenting. And it's probably connected to there's misconceptions about it.
Yes, there is such a stigma around gentle parenting. And I know people, even when I first started sharing gentle parenting, a lot of other gentle parents have now changed. They don't call themselves a gentle parent anymore because there's such a stigma out there. I am like, I am still going to continue because I stand by gentle parenting. And I think the misconception commonly is that people believe gentle parenting is permissive parenting, where, the word gentle is seen as, oh, you're just nice to your child all the time. Like, okay, honey, yes, whatever you want. Like, I don't want to stir the pot, like, as long as you're happy. And I can understand that might be the perception people have. But Gentle parenting is under the authoritative umbrella when you talk about different parenting approaches, where we do use consequences. We do use forms of positive discipline. The difference is that we see the child as a member in the family, not somebody to control, not somebody that needs to follow orders and listen just because I'm an adult or I'm a parent or I'm a teacher, but more of this is a young person who has skills to learn, and they're going to behave differently because they're so new in this world. They've only been on this planet for a few years, and they don't know how to behave when they're feeling angry. And so it's my job to help them experience their emotion and learn how to behave differently. So it takes time to parent or teach that way, because yes, traditional parenting, authoritarian parenting, where you just, you use fear-based tactics. If you don't do what I tell you to do, I'm going to punish you, or I'm going to take this away. You use a lot of threats, and it's very much fear-based. So you're controlling. So of course you're going to see a quicker response from a child, because nobody wants to get hurt and nobody wants to feel hurt. But then we grow up into adults with all of these, issues when it comes to interacting with other people. So gentle parents, they don't want children to feel shamed for having emotions. They help them through their emotions, and they help them build skills. So I'm constantly reminding my 6-year-old to how to sit at the table when we're having dinner. But I also understand his body needs to move. So that's why he's like that. It's not because he's trying to misbehave or trying to test me. It's his body has a hard time sitting still because he's 6 years old. So it's just constantly, either helping him ahead of time, like getting out that extra energy before dinner. So I'm helping him be set up for success, but I'm also, teaching him like constantly repetition. And eventually over the years, his body will develop more, his brain will develop more, and he'll understand what is appropriate at the dinner table. But right now, that's just where he is developmentally.
Yeah, my 6-year-old last night, literally, we had gotten Cafe Rio and he had a quesadilla. He would take a bite and then march around the island, go take another bite, march around the island. And instead of like, you need to sit down, I was like, obviously he needs to move his body right now. So it's okay that he's marching around the island and taking a bite. And then he eventually did join us, and it was all on his own versus us trying to force him.
I literally just had a memory of me doing that as a kid, and my dad saying like, "Are you done? Are you leaving?" And I was like, "No, I'm just digesting for a second," and like then sitting back down. But this, like you're framing about how we see children as like a member of the family who does not need to be controlled. Sometimes when I write about this stuff, instead of using children or kids, I will use the phrase young humans, because I think it like shakes people's like frame of mind a little bit because they're not used to that phrase. But when I first started doing that, a lot of our team was like, that's kind of weird. Like, why are you saying that? I'm like, because that's what they are. They're young humans, and we're not treating them like that. We're treating them like they're a different species, like a pet or an animal or something that we're trying to train and control. And when we really focus on how they are they're not little adults, but they are our same species, right? We should be treating them with a little bit more respect.
Yes, I agree with that completely.
All right. So what is Big Life Journal, and how does Big Life Journal incorporate all this stuff? Just talk about that for a little bit.
Sure. So Big Life Journal, we're a company that really started off trying to help children develop a growth mindset. And so we have journals for all ages. We have kids, teens, adult journal. And really the mission was to help children develop resilience and a growth mindset, to be kind, to have confidence with peer interactions. And these journals really help children practice how to think differently. And it's something that they can work with their parents on as well. And we have printables. I mean, it's expanded. So we have weekly Friday printables that touch on all sorts of topics. And we have newsletters to help with different ages, depending on how old your children are, with a tip and a resource. And something new that we just developed recently is a platform that houses all of our parenting resources, and it's called GrowthMinded. And this platform has all of our printables. We've just added master classes. We have live workshops. There's 2-minute quick tip videos. There's parenting scripts, parenting guides. And it's really because we understand how busy parents are, and they don't have time to go through hours of research that many of us have done. I've personally done. So our platform is designed for that busy parent who has a challenge at home with their children, and they can quickly research all of the resources we have related to that topic. Then they have it right there, right in front of them. They can watch the video. They can look at the script on their phone. They can download that printable and do that with their child. And it's something that we want to make as easy as possible for parents. And we're continuously adding resources to it. We're really wanting to add more tween and teen content because we know that our families their children are growing. They're entering that stage of life, and parents are needing resources to help get through that teen period.
I've actually had a chance to check out the platform GrowthMinded, and it is really, really awesome. I've recommended it to all of our guides. It's perfect for connect mode.
It's good for teachers and educators and coaches and not just parents, because like I said, any time a person is interacting with a child, these things really matter. And this is reframing really matters in their development.
Yes.
Okay, we could keep talking about these things all day long. Obviously, you could tell Kaity and I love talking about emotional regulation and the nervous system and all the things. And so this is a question that we ask all of our guests. Who is someone who has kindled your love of learning, curiosity, motivation, or passion?
Oh, that is a really good question because there's so many. And in, we have the parenting space, we have the self-development space. I guess if it's more for, I guess for both parenting and for personal, if anyone's ever heard of Dr. Shefali, she is somebody who she basically pioneered conscious parenting, which is also, we never really touched on this, but that's also a very important way of parenting. And I'm both a conscious and a gentle parent. But she has this way of just communicating exactly why it's so important to heal your inner child and to show as a way to show up how you want to show up for your children and the other people in your life. She's got so many parenting books out there. I've read them all.
I can't wait to read her new one. It's called The Parent Map.
The Parenting Map. Yeah, The Parenting Map. So good. And she, I was fortunate enough, Big Life Journal sent me to attend a conference that she held in Atlanta this year. Just a life-changing weekend. It was amazing. So I would highly recommend checking her out as well if you want to learn more about the conscious parenting way.
That's awesome. And how can people learn more about your work?
You can find me on Big Life Journal. We're on all social media platforms. And I'm also on Gentle Healing Mom, which is I share more about my healing journey as well as a parent. It's more of like my personal space. But if you're looking for resources, for science-based resources for parenting your children in a positive way, you can find all of our resources on Big Life Journal on any social media platform.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming on the KindlED podcast. We've loved this conversation and just want to thank you for your time.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you, KJ. That's it for today. We hope you enjoyed this episode of the KindlED podcast. If this episode was helpful to you, please like, subscribe, and come follow us at Prenda Learn. If you have a question you would like for us to answer on the podcast, all you have to do is email us at podcast@prenda.com. You can also join our free Facebook group, which is a great community of educators and parents. It's called the KindlED Collective. And we also have a weekly newsletter called the Sunday Spark.
The KindlED podcast is brought to you by Prenda. Prenda makes it easy for you to start and run an amazing microschool based on all the things we talk about here on the KindlED podcast. If you want more information about becoming a Prenda guide, go to prenda.com. Thanks for listening, and remember to keep kindling.